What's up, Anthony? I hope your back's feeling better. This is sort of like a short video to kind of go over all the stretches and stuff that we did together that last week. We did that little movement assessment. So I think the main issue that you're having is your hip external rotation. So when we're doing all of our stretches today, whether it's the pigeon on the ground, the box pigeon, or even that figure four against the wall, the main thing we want to be doing is kind of stretching this outside part of your hip. So that's the main stuff you want to feel stretched. So we'll go over the pigeon pose, and again, I know you got the blocks now, so this would be really handy for you to use whether it's here or at home. And I can show you where I keep mine at the gym. You can use them whenever you're here, so you don't have to bring your own every time. But for the pigeon pose, I want to try to get our foot out in front, and then with the block, we're going to kind of put it towards like the back side of the hip, just so it's a little more supported. And then we want to feel that stretch mostly in like that kind of higher outside part of our glute. And you want to try to get this foot lined up with the knee, and you can even kind of scoot your back leg back a little bit and see if you can get just a little more stretch coming through this backside here. But again, the block is kind of just positioned under my hip, just give it like a little bit better leverage and a better stretch. So when we're sitting here, you can kind of maneuver your body around. Like you might find that rotating your shoulder towards the knee gives you a better stretch, pushing your butt back might give you a better stretch. Whatever feels like it gives this kind of outside hip area the best stretch, just kind of hunker down there. So we're gonna spend about like 2 minutes, and then the goal for the stretch really is to feel like some of the tension that you're feeling as you initially get into the stretch starts to dissipate a little bit. And it might take like 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, kind of just sit there as long as you feel like you need to get some of that tension to go away. So after you've done that one side, just go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, just keep things even. Another version we talked about for the pigeon is doing it on top of a box. And this one, again, you might get better leverage for your hip. You might find that it just gives you like a better stretch altogether. So for the box pigeon, you're just gonna prop the block up on here. And again, for this one's a little bit different. We're gonna get the knee on top of the block, and then we're gonna kind of scoot your back foot away from the block so we get that stretch to come through the outside. And again, drop your hands down here, keep your back nice and extended. We don't wanna be flexed over. If you round off here, we're not gonna get a whole lot of stretch. So make sure, extend your back, stay nice and flat through here, and keep this back leg nice and straight. And kind of settle into the box once you feel like you have that good stretch on that hip. Again, just spend like preferably 2 minutes or more in this position. While you're here, you can kind of do the same thing as when you're on the ground. You can kind of lean into the side a little bit if it gives you a better stretch, rotate over if it gives you a better stretch. Anytime you're doing a stretch though, don't necessarily associate more with better. So just because if I really push my butt back and I lean my weight in just because it gives me more of a stretch on that like outside hip tissue, doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna be better. So just try to find a spot where you get a pretty good stretch on the outside of your hip, but it feels that you can sit there for, again, at least like 2 minutes. So the last stretch that we talked about is just like that figure four against the wall. So all you need is any kind of wall. When you set up, get your butt relatively close to the wall, prop your foot up, then we're gonna get the ankle on top of the knee, start to drop your butt down a little bit. And again, when we feel the stretch, we still wanna feel it in relatively like that same spot. This one might be a little bit lower, like towards your hamstring, but we still wanna feel it kind of on the higher, like outside glute tissue. And then while you're here, you can also kind of take your hand, really gently push that knee forward. And if it gives you a better stretch, that's great. If it feels like too much, you can back out of it. Again, same goal here, like 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, just until we feel like that hip starts to ease up and starts to become a little bit more mobile. And again, try to do it on both sides if you can. And if you need to, you can scoot a little bit closer, like get your butt closer to the wall if it feels like it gives you a more appropriate stretch. As a rule of thumb, the closer your butt gets to the wall, the more stretch is gonna be out here. When we are in this stretch, we do wanna make sure we can get our lower back to the ground. So if you're here and your butt's super high off the ground, it's not really a good position to be in because your hip's gonna have a really hard time relaxing because it's basically supporting a lot of your body weight. So find a position where you can get your low back on the ground and you can kind of relax it and stretch. Whoa. So that's kind of it for all the stretching stuff. The one other thing we talked about is getting like a little bit more motion in like your SI joint, your lower back, because you have a pretty typical, we call it like a CrossFit spine, where that lower back area kind of sits in a lot of extension. So I think it's gonna end up putting a a lot of pressure here. So one thing that could help is getting some more of what we call flexion, where the spine comes back in this direction. So the first drill that we talked about was like that ground-based drill where you're on your back, and we're going to use the ground as kind of like a feedback tool. So as you're just laying here, you're just letting your spine sit naturally, you should feel space between your lower back, your lumbar spine, and the ground. And you should feel like your tailbone or your SI joint area is sitting on the ground. And what we're going to try to do is take our pelvis and pull it up and into our stomach and try to get like the lower part of our spine, kind of the SI joint area, up off the ground, and then in turn get our lower back, our lumbar spine, to start to press into the ground because we're pulling that lowest portion off. And you should really feel like a lot of low ab activity. So try to get as much lift as you can, feel a good squeeze through here. And then instead of letting everything just drop back to the ground, slowly unwind that tension and kind of let that lower part of your spine, that SI joint area, go back into the floor and let that lumbar spine come off the ground. Now we're just gonna do like anywhere from like 5 to 7 reps, just until you feel like you're getting some good tuck with that pelvis and kind of good rounding of that lowest part of your spine. And you can feel like a good amount of core activation, like lower abs. Things kind of working all the way up and all the way back in. So after you've done about like 5 to 7 of those, we're gonna work from a cat-cow position just to try to integrate some of that movement without the ground. So the cat-cow position, we're gonna set up here. This box away from my head. We're going to set up here, and we're going to start with kind of just our base neutral position, and we're going to work on, again, getting that lowest part of our spine to move. So you can actually start by kind of extending that low part of your spine so it has like a more palpable starting point, and then from there, we'll work on pulling the lowest part of our spine kind of up in towards our stomach, so it's that same pelvic tucking motion. And again, you should feel a little bit of like low ab activation, core activation, once you kind of reach your max before rounding the upper part of your spine. You're going to go back in the other direction and start to extend it as much as you can. Hold it for a little bit. Flex back up and in. Try to get that pelvis to tuck, tuck, tuck. Hold for a little bit. Get those low abs to kind of activate and slowly work back in the other direction. And for this one, you can do like anywhere from like 4 to 6 in each direction. And like with any exercise, you can start to ramp up the intensity. So if you feel more comfortable, you can start to really work on pulling your pelvis up and in, really squeezing those abs. And that's just gonna force these muscles to start work a little bit harder. And again, get more of like that flexion back into like the lower part of your spine. So you're not always sitting in that kind of overextended position, and these aren't like chronically getting irritated and shortened. So I hope all that made sense. If anything didn't make sense, or you need some more help with any of the stretches or any of those exercises, just let me know.